Did you know that the Porseleinberg ward, one of the 8 subdivisions of the Swartland wine district, was the ward to give South Africa its very first 100-point Syrah? Now, the winemaker was Kalilo, and he was working with fruit from the farm of Porseleinberg. The critic who gave the points was Master of Wine Tim Atkin from the United Kingdom, and for those unicorn wine hunters, the vintage concerned was the Porseleinberg Syrah 2018. South African Syrah has always been central to what has been called the Swartland Revolution, which kind of unfolded over the first 2 decades of the new millennium. But I would argue that this 100-point rating for this Porseleinberg Syrah shifted the focus somewhat, or at least made a sort of explicit announcement of a new movement, which has come to be called the Syrah Revolution. Now, in South Africa, a number of really world-class, highly acclaimed Syrahs have been produced in certain sites right across the South African winelands. So shifting the focus away from the Swartland and shifting it more directly onto the cultivar of Syrah. And the trickle-down effect of this movement has been that Syrah is now fast approaching Cabernet Sauvignon as the most planted red cultivar in South Africa. Porseleinberg, the farm, exists as something of a monopole within the ward of Porseleinberg, because if they chose to, they would be the only ones to bottle under wine of origin Porseleinberg. As it turns out, they bottle as wine of Swartland anyway, giving up their rights to the monopole. But if we shift our eyes westward across the plain, we see another ward called the Paardeberg, and this is a sort of conceptual complete opposite to the Porseleinberg, because far from being a monopole, Paardeberg has an incredibly long list of very famous, widely acclaimed winemakers, all vying for fruit in various parcels within a single ward. These winemakers include global names like Adi Badenhorst, or Eben Sadi, or David and Nadia. You have Jürgen Goos from Intellego, you have Jean Smit from Damacy, Samantha Suddens from Vinevenom, and even Whiteman and Sons. Paardeberg also happens to be the Swartland ward that has provided today's HanDrinksSolo wine of the day, with the Old Road Wine Company's 12-mile Syrah, vinified by winemaker Ryan Puttick. The Old Road Wine Company is owned by DGB Distribution, and DGB formed back in 1991 when Graham Beck's Union Wine joined with what was then Douglas Green of Paarl. Today, DGB are one of the biggest distributors in South Africa, and they own a whole bunch of their own brands, which you will have seen dotted around on various retail shelves. These brands include Boschendal, Bellingham, Brampton, Fries Cove, and the ever-revered Tall Horse. But the Old Road Wine Company is DGB's bid to deliver a genuinely terroir-focused range of wines. They showcase exclusively single vineyard wines, or at least single site wines. Now, of course, they're not the only ones to do this, because this sort of ethos would put them in the same vein as Anthony Rupert's Cape of Good Hope wine range, or even Wildeburg's Strange Company range. But what Old Road Company have done particularly well is combine some really distinctive, memorable sites with some really sensitive winemaking on the part of Ryan Puttick. Now, I won't go into all of the sites now because I've done so in another video, but I will leave a link to that video so you can learn more about the company. What I will say is that for the most part, the Old Road Wine Company have chosen to explore vineyard sites that all fall within the Franschhoek Valley, and yet there must have been something just too good to ignore in the 12-mile Syrah site, because despite not being in Franschhoek, the Old Road Wine Company chose to venture forth into the Swartland, more specifically into Paardeberg, in order to produce this wine. And the gamble paid off, because in 2023, the 2021 vintage of the 12-mile Syrah by Old Road Wine Company won the Business Day Trophy for Best Shiraz within the Investec Trophy Wine Show. And if that wasn't enough, a year previously, their Grand Mère Old Vine Semillon also won the trophy for the best wine in its class. And at this point, you may rightly ask, well, what is so special about this 12-mile vineyard that makes it earn its spot within the Old Road Wine Company range? And the answer is threefold. First of all, it's in the Paardeberg ward. And as I said earlier, and implied by the other winemakers who work in that region, it comes about as close to hallowed ground as the Swartland has. Secondly, it sits at a solid 360 meters above sea level. And we've spoken before about how vineyard sites at higher altitudes can deliver higher diurnal range, that is, temperature between day and night. And there's another video where I talk all about why that's important and how it links to wine quality. So I'm not going to do it here, but I have also left that link below. Thirdly, this vineyard is completely dry land farmed, Now, there are some very reputable winemakers in the Swartland who swear that to farm anything dry land in the Swartland is impossible. And yet, this is exactly what's happened with this particular vineyard. This incredibly low level of water use, i.e. 0, is an absolute dream for any forward-minded viticulturalist. But even more so for wine lovers, this dryland treatment of the vineyards means that the fruit that it delivers is a lot more concentrated, delivering a wine with a lot more power. Speaking of the wine in the glass, let's give it a sniff. Starting out, the nose is really quite brooding. There's a lot of sort of roasted black plum note, but then it freshens up really quickly, and what joins that roasted plum is some really quite vibrant, articulate blackberry fruit. And then these fruit elements themselves are in turn complicated by more sort of elevations of clove spice and even a gentle touch of lavender. And finally, no Swartland Syrah would be complete without at least an element of the savoury, which is exactly what you get here. A little touch of black olive tapenade, that classic white pepper spice, and a little bit of barrel-inspired cedar wood on the finish. When we take a sip, well, the wine is by no means a heavyweight, but it is supremely intense. And really, that intensity comes from this contrast between those riper black fruit notes that we smelled, then some delightfully surprising tart, bright, juicy red elements, mostly kind of sour cherry and raspberry, which I completely missed on the nose. So it's the contrast between the black fruit and the red fruit that makes it really arresting. And all of that is really wrapped up in some fairly well integrated tannins. And then you've got those notes of spice, clove, pepper, and that cedar wood, which is just lovely right on the finish. So that's all we have time for today. But if you have any questions about the Porcelainberg or Paardeberg or the Swartland in general, then leave a comment and I'll get back to you. And if you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo YouTube channel, where we publish 6 videos every month on things like wine science, wine history, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars that are coming out of the dynamic South African winelands.